Get your hands off me! The voice cracked through the humid Detroit air like a whip. Officer Marcus Hale had just slammed his fist across Aisha Washington's face, right in front of the crowd. Her badge, still tucked inside her purse, clinked faintly against her phone as she staggered back. One hand clutching her cheek. Gasps rippled through the park. The man who hit her had no idea who she was, or what would follow in the months ahead. Before we go into this story, take a moment. Tell us where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, because what you're about to hear will shake your faith in justice itself. It began as an ordinary summer afternoon at Campus Martius Park. Aisha was off duty, enjoying a rare break after months of classified counterterrorism work. She stood by a food vendor, talking with her husband Jamal over the phone, laughing softly about dinner plans. The music from nearby speakers mixed with the chatter of families and the hiss of the propane tanks set up for the upcoming festival. But her eyes caught something immediately. A man in uniform, cigarette in hand, leaning casually against one of those tanks. Marcus Hale. His stance carried the arrogance of someone too used to authority. His hand flicked ash dangerously close to the valve marked 1,000 gallons propane. Aisha's instincts kicked in. She hung up and walked over calmly, identifying herself with quiet confidence. "Excuse me, officer. Could you please step away from the tank? That's extremely unsafe." Hale turned, half smiling, half sneering. "Don't tell me what's safe. Lady, go enjoy your smoothie or whatever it is you people do." The phrase hit her harder than it sounded. Not just the tone, but the dismissive venom behind it. She didn't react right away. She'd faced worse during field ops overseas. But something about that day felt different. Nearby, Harold Jenkins, a white man in his late 60s, sat on a bench, newspaper folded on his lap, watching quietly. A few feet away, a young Hispanic woman, Sofia Ramirez, recorded a voice memo on her phone, testing her microphone for a school project. Neither of them knew they would soon become the most important witnesses in a federal trial. Aisha tried once more, her voice steady but firm. "Sir, this tank could explode if—" He interrupted, eyes narrowing. "Who do you think you are, huh? Some safety inspector? Or maybe one of those government know-it-alls?" His tone sharpened. "You look out of place here. Why don't you leave before you cause a problem?" His words carried a sting of racial contempt that Aisha knew all too well. She glanced at his badge. Hale. M. And noticed his trembling hand, the faint smell of alcohol on his breath. She had seen this type before, veterans who never truly left the battlefield, now wielding authority on American streets with the same aggression they once used overseas. Aisha took a slow breath. "I'm just asking you to follow the safety code. Officer Hale, that's all." He smirked. "Or what? You gonna arrest me?" The sarcasm turned to rage in an instant. He stepped closer, eyes blazing. "I've had enough of people like you thinking they can tell me how to do my job." "People like me?" she repeated, voice calm but trembling with restrained anger. He didn't answer. He shoved her shoulder instead. The crowd froze. Aisha stepped back, steadying herself. She'd promised Jamal she wouldn't let her temper define her career. Not after everything her father went through in this very city decades earlier. But when Hale's hand shot up again, instinct took over. He swung. She turned. His knuckles grazed her cheek instead of breaking her jaw. Pain flared, but she stayed standing. "Stop!" she commanded, her tone shifting instantly. That unmistakable authority that came from years in the bureau. He hesitated for half a second, long enough for her to pull herself upright. The old man on the bench rose halfway, unsure whether to intervene. Sophia's phone was still recording. The audio would later capture every word, every breath, every insult. Hale spat on the ground. "You don't talk to me like that. You're nobody." Aisha's lips parted. blood trailing down her chin. "You just assaulted a federal officer." His expression faltered, confusion flickering for the first time. "You're lying." "I don't lie," she said quietly. "And I don't back down." She reached into her jacket pocket, revealing the faint glint of a badge, FBI Counterterrorism Division. The air seemed to still. People began to whisper. Hale stepped back slightly, glancing around, searching for backup or maybe for an escape from the sudden gravity of his mistake. His partner, Officer Derek Vaughn, approached from across the park, hearing the commotion. "Marcus! What's going on?" he called out. Hale pointed at Aisha, his voice thick with fury. "This woman's attacking an officer." Aisha turned toward Vaughn, voice steady. "That's not true. He hit me after I asked him to stop smoking near a propane tank." Harold Jenkins stepped closer, trembling but resolute. "I saw it." She told him to stop, polite as can be. "He hit her first," Sophia added nervously. "I have the audio. I didn't mean to record, but it's all here." Hale's eyes widened, panic seeping in. His authority, the armor he'd worn for years, began to crack. "Shut that off," he barked at Sophia, but the damage was done. Within minutes, Sergeant Elias Ford arrived, his gray hair slicked back, voice low and measured. "What's going on here?" "Hale?" he asked. The younger officer scrambled for justification. She was threatening me." "Sir." Ford looked at Aisha, then at the crowd forming around them. He recognized the control in her posture, the precision in her words. This was no civilian. His gut twisted. He'd spent 25 years keeping problems like this quiet. But something about her eyes told him this one wouldn't go away easily. Aisha adjusted her badge slightly so everyone could see it clearly. "Sergeant Ford. I'm Special Agent Aisha Washington with the FBI. I suggest you de-escalate this before it gets worse." Ford's jaw tightened. "Agent or not, you're in my city, my jurisdiction. We'll handle this our way." She met his stare, unflinching. "Your way just broke the law." The words hung heavy, cutting through the thick summer air like a blade. No one moved. Even the music had stopped. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a fitting echo of what was coming, because this wasn't just a scuffle in a park, it was the first crack in a wall of silence that had stood for decades, and that wall was about to fall. Marcus Hale's hand still trembled, though not from fear, from the same uncontrolled fury that had ruled him since Iraq. The punch he'd thrown had crossed a line, but the shock of seeing that FBI badge pushed him into a darker rage. "You think that scares me?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You're not better than me. Agent or not." His words slurred slightly, a faint trace of whiskey lingering in every syllable. The crowd stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or record. Aisha steadied herself, breathing through the dull ache on her cheek. She knew how this could spiral. She'd trained hundreds of officers on de-escalation. Yet here she was, a victim of everything she had sworn to prevent. "Officer Hale," she said evenly, "you need to step back and put your hands where I can see them." He laughed bitterly, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "You people always think rules don't apply to you? Well, not in my city." He lunged forward, shoving her shoulder again. That was his second mistake. Aisha's instincts switched from restraint to survival, in a fluid motion learned from years of military training. She sidestepped, caught his wrist, twisted, and redirected his momentum until he dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. She didn't strike back. She only held him still. "Don't make me cuff you, officer," she warned, her tone still calm. For a moment, it seemed like reason might return. But then Derek Vaughn, the young rookie officer, arrived at a run. He saw Hale on his knees, Aisha standing above him, blood on her lip, and his mind filled in the wrong story. "Get off him!" he shouted, grabbing her arm and yanking her backward. The sudden pull caused her to lose balance, but she recovered fast, turning to face him. "I'm a federal agent. Back off," she said, showing her badge again. Vaughn froze, eyes flicking between her and Hale, who was now staggering to his feet, face red with humiliation. "She assaulted me," Hale barked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She went crazy. Tried to grab my weapon? That's a lie," Aisha replied sharply. "There are witnesses here who saw everything. You hit me first. Liar!" Hale snapped, pointing at Harold Jenkins. "That old man's senile. He doesn't know what he saw." Harold, trembling but resolute, raised his voice. "I may be old, but I ain't blind. You hit her, son, and you ought to be ashamed." Hale's expression darkened. He turned to Vaughn, his tone icy. "You believe me or some civilian and this woman who thinks she can tell us how to do our job?" Vaughn hesitated. He had been on the force less than 2 years, still idealistic enough to believe in brotherhood. Marcus. "Maybe we should calm down." "No!" Hale roared. "She's lying! She's trying to ruin my career!" His voice cracked with desperation, the kind that came from years of unhealed wounds. He looked like a man fighting ghosts only he could see. Aisha took one cautious step forward. "Officer Hale, I don't want to arrest you. I'm giving you a chance to walk away." "Walk away?" His lips twisted into a snarl. "You people never walk away. You come into our neighborhoods, our precincts, and you act like heroes. The emphasis on you people wasn't lost on anyone." Aisha met his stare, unflinching. "The only thing I'm acting like," she said softly, "is someone who still believes in the law." Then Hale's hand twitched toward his holster. For one terrifying second, everything stopped. The crowd gasped again, a ripple of panic spreading. Aisha's hand went to her sidearm, but she didn't draw. She only rested it there, eyes locked on his. "Don't," she said, voice low but firm. "Don't make this worse than it already is." "Marcus, stop!" Vaughn shouted, stepping between them. His hand hovered near his own gun, uncertain who to defend. Hale's breathing was ragged, his pupils dilated. "She's trying to get me fired," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "They always do this." "That's enough!" Another voice cut through the chaos. Sergeant Elias Ford had returned after calling for backup, his presence heavy with authority. "Hale, stand down." Hale didn't move. His knuckles whitened around his belt. Ford stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You're making a damn fool of yourself. Let me handle this." Hale looked at him, desperate for an ally. "She hit me. Sarge, you saw her." "I saw a mess," Ford interrupted coldly. "And you're not helping yourself." He turned to Aisha. "Voice even. Agent Washington, we'll take it from here." She stared at him, seeing through the polished calm. Ford was the type who didn't shout. He controlled. He manipulated. "You mean you'll bury it?" she replied. "Like the 4 complaints against him you already buried." Ford's eyes flickered. "Watch your tone. Agent, watch your officers," she countered. The crowd murmured. Some started filming now, though most only caught the aftermath, not the punch that started it all. Ford's face tightened. "Everyone here, disperse. This is a police matter." Aisha took a slow step forward. "Not anymore. You assaulted a federal agent in front of witnesses." She turned to Vaughn, who looked like a man trapped between 2 worlds. "Officer Vaughn, you saw what happened. You can do the right thing." Vaughn swallowed hard, his lips parted, then closed again. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Hale smirked faintly, sensing that old loyalty might still protect him. But the crowd wasn't leaving. Harold crossed his arms. Sophia clutched her phone, whispering to Aisha. "I recorded part of it." The sound. Aisha nodded subtly. "Hold on to it. Don't let anyone near your phone." Hale caught the exchange and snapped. "You delete that right now." His voice cracked into a shout, the kind that made children cry and grown men step back. That's evidence, Aisha said. Touch her, and I'll put you in cuffs. Ford exhaled heavily, his patience thinning. Enough. We're going to the precinct, all of us. No, Aisha said quietly. We're not. You can't detain a federal agent for doing her job. Then I'm suspending you, Ford snapped. Effective immediately. You don't have that authority, she replied, holding up her phone as she pressed a single button. A direct line to Maya Thompson, her colleague at the Bureau. This is Special Agent Washington, she said clearly, requesting federal response at Campus Marchis Park. Officer on agent assault. Active obstruction from Sergeant Ford. Multiple witnesses. The shift was immediate. Ford's face lost its color. Hale's anger turned into panic. Vaughn stepped back. Realizing this was far beyond their control, sirens echoed in the distance, this time. Not Detroit PD. Aisha lowered the phone and stared at Hale. You wanted to show power, she said quietly. Now you'll see what real accountability looks like. Ford gritted his teeth. You just made enemies you can't afford. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. She replied. As the federal vehicles approached, lights flashing red and blue across the park, Hale muttered under his breath. You think you've won? Aisha looked at him, not with triumph, but with pity. No, she said softly. No one wins in a system like this, but someone has to start changing it. And as the crowd watched her stand unshaken, the story of that moment began its slow climb toward national outrage, an outrage that would soon rip the silence wide open. The Detroit precinct was tense that night, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Aisha sat in an interview room, a faint bruise forming on her cheek where Marcus Hale's fist had landed hours earlier. Across the hall, Hale and Sergeant Elias Ford stood behind closed doors, whispering in low, conspiratorial tones. The blue wall of silence was rising, and she could feel it closing around her. Ford entered the room finally, slow and deliberate. Agent Washington, he began, you've caused quite the scene today. Assaulting a local officer, escalating in public. That's not how the Bureau usually operates. His words were calm, but his eyes carried something else. A warning. Aisha folded her hands, voice even. If you're implying I should have let your officer smoke next to 1,000 gallons of propane, you might want to review your safety protocols. Ford smirked slightly. You're sharp. I'll give you that. But this isn't the FBI's playground in Detroit. We handle our own. She met his gaze. Then you should have handled Hale before he hit me. The air in the room turned heavy. Ford leaned in slightly, lowering his tone. You think this is the first time something like this happened? Let me tell you something. Complaints come and go. Paper disappears. Cameras fail. But reputations, those stick. Are you sure you want yours dragged through the mud over one bad day? It wasn't a threat. It was a promise dressed as advice. Aisha didn't flinch. You can threaten my career, Sergeant. But the truth doesn't go away. And this time, people saw it. Ford leaned back, nodding slowly. People see what they're told to see. He turned toward the door, muttering, I'll handle the reports. The door shut behind him, through the small window. She caught a glimpse of Hale laughing quietly with Vaughn. That hollow kind of laughter used to drown fear. She exhaled, steady but tense. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya Thompson, her FBI partner, Aisha. I got your alert. You okay? I've been better, she said softly. Local PD's already circling the wagons. Then we'll break the circle, Maya replied. Don't say a word until I get there, while she waited. The precinct clock ticked louder than usual. She thought about her father, how 30 years ago, he'd been arrested on this same street for resisting when he'd done nothing wrong. The pain of his death still burned quietly inside her. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal. Moments later, Dr. Lena Brooks arrived, carrying her medical kit. "Agent Washington," she said warmly. "I was called for an injury check." "Of course." Aisha nodded. Lena examined her face gently, her professional tone steady. Bruised cheek, minor cut on the lip, nothing broken. "But I'll document it thoroughly." She looked up, eyes firm. "You want this on record?" "Absolutely." Lena smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm not letting them sweep this under the rug." Outside the room, Hale's voice grew louder. "That woman attacked me. You're really going to take her side?" Ford answered quietly. "Calm down. We'll fix this. I've done it before." But what neither man noticed was that Sofia Ramirez, the young woman from the park, had already emailed her audio file to the FBI public tip line. It was only 38 seconds long, but it captured Hale's words, the sound of his fist connecting, and Aisha's steady voice identifying herself as a federal agent. Evidence that couldn't vanish. Later that evening, Ford ordered Vaughn to secure the witnesses. The younger officer hesitated. "You mean talk to them?" "No," Ford said sharply. "Make sure they understand this was all a misunderstanding. You get me?" Vaughn nodded uneasily. Though his conscience was already twisting, he wasn't like Hale. Not yet. He drove to Harold Jenkins's home first. The old man opened the door, cautious but unafraid. "Evening." "Officer," he said. Vaughn tried to sound casual. "Just checking in." "Sir, about the incident today. You probably saw things from a distance, right?" Harold studied his face. "I saw what I saw. That woman didn't touch him until he hit her." "You sure you want to put yourself in the middle of this?" Vaughn asked softly. "People get misquoted." Harold's voice hardened. "Son, I've lived through worse. Tell your boss I'm not changing my story." Vaughn said nothing, only nodded and walked away, guilt pressing down like a weight. His next stop was Sophia's apartment. She was visibly shaken but determined. "I already sent the recording. She said the moment she opened the door, 'You can't stop it.'" Vaughn froze. "You sent it to who?" "The FBI. My uncle's a lawyer. I'm not stupid." He sighed deeply. "Look, I'm not here to hurt you. Just be careful. There are people in this department who don't like being embarrassed." She looked at him closely. "You mean people like you?" He met her eyes for a long second. "Not anymore," he said quietly. The next morning, Ford convened a closed-door meeting with Internal Affairs, trying to bury the entire case under pending investigation. But by then, Aisha had already contacted the Bureau's Detroit field office. Federal jurisdiction was clear: assault on an agent, obstruction, and attempted witness intimidation. The silence Ford relied on for 25 years was starting to crumble. When Maya arrived that afternoon, she hugged Aisha briefly before sitting across from her. "You good?" "Just tired," Aisha replied. "They're scared." Maya, "Not because of what happened, but because it's finally public." Maya nodded. "They'll fight back, expect leaked stories, false reports, character attacks. They already started." Aisha said, "Ford told the local news I was off-duty and aggressive, but I'm not afraid of a smear. I'm afraid of what happens if we stop." Maya's eyes softened. "Then we don't stop." That night, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Aisha sat by her apartment window beside Jamal. "You could walk away," he said gently. "Transfer out. Let someone else handle this mess." She shook her head. "I can't. Not again. My father didn't get justice. But I can't let his city stay like this." Jamal took her hand. "Then we'll face it together." Down the street, unmarked cars rolled by, quiet reminders that the department wasn't done with her, somewhere in an evidence room. Hale's report was already rewritten to make her look like the aggressor. But the truth was no longer theirs to shape. The Bureau was moving, witnesses were protected, audio verified, and as Aisha stared at the bruised reflection in her mirror, she whispered to herself, "You wanted silence, Sergeant Ford. But now, the whole country's going to hear." The investigation deepened faster than anyone expected. Within days, the Detroit Police Department was no longer in control of the narrative. The Bureau's internal affairs team, alongside federal prosecutors, began pulling every file linked to Marcus Hale and Sergeant Ford. 4 complaints became 4 doors, each leading to more rot underneath. Aisha sat in her small FBI field office cubicle, the bruise on her cheek fading but the memory burning deeper. Maya leaned over her shoulder, scrolling through the latest data. "He's worse than we thought," Maya murmured. 4 excessive force cases, all dismissed. 2 witnesses disappeared before testimony. 1 moved states. The signatures on the dismissal forms? She tapped the screen. Elias Ford. Aisha stared at the evidence, her jaw tightening. 25 years in service. No oversight. He's not protecting Hale. He's protecting a network. The pieces were coming together, and they pointed to something far bigger than one violent outburst. Hale wasn't just a rogue cop. He was a pawn in a circle of officers skimming money from security contracts and illegal weapons sales, all funneled through fake overtime and seized property auctions. The Bureau had been watching Detroit PD for months, but Aisha's assault had cracked the lid open. She was now both victim and investigator. "We need Vaughn," Aisha said quietly. "He's the weak link. Young, impressionable, scared. He's also being watched." Maya warned. "Ford called him into his office this morning. They know he's wavering." Aisha stood, grabbing her jacket. "Then I'll get to him first." That night, the city was restless, a mix of tension and disbelief. News stations had picked up the officer-on-agent story, though details were still murky. The police union called it a misunderstanding. Community activists called it what it was, abuse of power, and for the first time in years, Detroit's people were watching closely. At the same time, Sofia Ramirez noticed a dark sedan parked across her apartment for 2 nights in a row. Her calls to 911 went unanswered. Fear turned to resolve. She messaged Jamal Washington directly. She'd found his name in a news article quoting him as the husband of Agent Washington, within hours. Jamal gathered volunteers from his community program, setting up shifts outside Sofia's building. They weren't armed, just present, watching, protecting. Jamal knew what it meant to take a stand in a city that often punished the brave. Back at headquarters, Aisha met with Carla Simmons, the federal prosecutor assigned to the case. Carla was sharp, calm, and known for her precision in civil rights cases. "Agent Washington," she began, "your report is solid, but we'll need more. The audio helps, but juries need patterns, not moments. We'll get patterns." Aisha replied. "Ford's been covering misconduct for years. Someone in that department has receipts." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Then find them fast, before he erases them." Meanwhile, Hale was unraveling. The department placed him on administrative leave, but his paranoia spiraled. He drank heavier, called Ford at all hours, and swore he was being followed by feds with cameras. Ford, on the other hand, was calm, too calm. He'd survived scandals before, and his confidence came from knowing how bureaucracy worked. "If we delay the internal review and control the paperwork," he told Vaughn one morning, "we can bury this by next quarter. The media moves on fast." Vaughn shifted uneasily. "And if they don't?" Ford's eyes narrowed. "Then we remind people who the real heroes are. Don't forget, rookie, we protect our own." But that phrase, "protect our own," no longer comforted Vaughn. It haunted him, that night, unable to sleep. He drove to the park where it all started, The same propane tank was still fenced off, a silent reminder of how something so small had ignited a war. He saw Aisha sitting alone on a bench nearby, reviewing notes. "You shouldn't be here," she said without looking up. "Neither should you." He replied softly. She turned, meeting his eyes. He looked younger than she remembered. Guilt etched deep into his face. "I can't keep doing this," he said. "They told me to scare the witnesses, make it disappear." "I didn't." "I know," she said. "That's why you're still breathing." He almost smiled, then sighed. "They've got people inside IA. Ford's been bribing one of them to leak updates. He knows what's coming before it hits his desk." "Names?" she asked. "Detective Lyle Barrett," Vaughn whispered. "He handles internal case audits." She nodded. "Memorizing it. You need to protect yourself. Once they know you talked, you're done." He swallowed hard. "You think the Bureau will protect me?" "No," she said honestly. "But I will." The next morning, Ford stormed into Hale's apartment after learning about Vaughn's meeting. "You talked to her?" he yelled, slamming his fist against the table. Hale blinked, confused. "Who?" "Washington. Don't play dumb. Someone told her about Barrett." Hale shook his head violently. "Not me. That rookie's cracking." Ford paced. "Then we'll fix that before he ruins everything." His phone buzzed. A text from Chief Victoria Lang. "We need to talk." DOJ inquiry opened. "Report to headquarters immediately." Ford's stomach dropped. The walls were closing in. Meanwhile, Aisha and Maya reviewed the data Vaughn provided, hidden among old audit logs. They discovered a pattern of financial transfers. Police overtime funds redirected to shell charities and then funneled into offshore accounts. 15 officers, Maya whispered, all connected to Ford. "This is it," Aisha said. "This isn't just brutality, it's corruption," before she could continue. Her phone buzzed. It was Jamal. "Aisha, we've got a problem. That car outside Sophia's apartment. They're back. 2 men this time. Stay inside," Aisha said. "Don't confront them." "Too late." Jamal replied, "They're already on the move." Aisha and Maya rushed across the city, sirens piercing through the night. When they arrived, community members had surrounded the car, flashlights on, cameras rolling. The men inside tried to back away, but the crowd blocked them in. One of them stepped out, flashing a police badge. Aisha approached, her voice steady but commanding. "Turn around and put your hands where I can see them." He hesitated, then obeyed. She pulled his ID, Detective Lyle Barrett. She read aloud. "Well, looks like we found our leak." The next day, headlines exploded. FBI agent assault uncovers police corruption network. The mayor called for an emergency press conference. The Justice Department launched a full-scale investigation. Chief Lang faced cameras, her voice cracking as she said, "We will cooperate fully." But everyone knew it was too late. Trust had already shattered. That evening, as Aisha stood on her balcony overlooking the flickering lights of Detroit, Maya joined her with quiet pride. "You started a storm," she said. Aisha looked out over her city, bruised, but not broken. "No," she replied softly. "I just stopped pretending there wasn't one." And somewhere in the silence, she knew. This was only the beginning of justice coming undone and rebuilt. One truth at a time. By mid-August, the case had become a firestorm. Every news network in Detroit led with it. An FBI agent assaulted, a police department under federal scrutiny, and whispers of an entire system built on silence and fear. Inside her small apartment, Aisha Washington reviewed the latest reports with Maya and Carla Simmons. The federal prosecutor, "They're cornered," Carla said, sliding a file across the table. "Ford's been shredding documents, Hale's missing interviews, and Chief Lang is pushing for a press statement denying everything." Aisha rubbed her temples, exhausted, They won't go quietly. Ford's too old to start over, and Hale's too angry to admit guilt. They'll burn the place down before they confess. Then we make sure the fire burns where it should, Maya said. But Ford was already plotting, inside his dimly lit office. He met with 2 former officers now working as private consultants. "I want dirt," he ordered. "Anything that discredits her. Arrest record, disciplinary history, something about her husband, anything." One of the men smirked. "We heard she was in Afghanistan. Maybe we say she had trauma. Unstable." Ford nodded slowly. "Do it. Make it believable." Within days, anonymous tips began reaching local reporters, painting Aisha as an unstable veteran prone to emotional outbursts. The smear worked for a moment, until Lena Brooks, the doctor who had treated her, stepped forward. Agent Washington was calm, professional, and composed. Lena told the media, "The only aggression I saw was from Officer Hale." Her statement carried weight. It came from a respected black physician in the community, someone whose voice couldn't be dismissed as bias. Ford's frustration grew. His influence within the department was collapsing. Detectives he once commanded began cooperating with federal investigators. Even Vaughn, the young officer, had gone missing for a day before showing up at the FBI office, pale and shaking. "They tried to get me to lie," he admitted to Aisha, said if I testified, I'd never work again. "You did the right thing coming here," she told him. "You still can make this right." He nodded slowly. "Then I will." Meanwhile, Jamal Washington had become a local figure of hope. He organized a peaceful march through downtown Detroit. Hundreds of people walking with signs that read, "Accountability for all and justice for Aisha." Sophia Ramirez, still shaken but resolute, walked beside him, holding her phone as proof of what she'd recorded. "You shouldn't be out here," Jamal told her gently. "You're a target now." She smiled faintly. "So are you, Mr. Washington. Guess we both made the same choice." As crowds filled Campus Marcius Park, the same place where everything began, the chants grew louder. Reporters flooded the scene. Mayor Lorenzo Diaz gave a brief statement promising cooperation, but his face betrayed unease. "When justice becomes political," he said, "truth becomes everyone's responsibility behind the scenes." Chief Victoria Lang faced a moral collapse. She'd known about Ford's actions for years, but justified her silence as protecting the department. Now, she was under investigation for dereliction of duty. Her phone buzzed non-stop with calls from City Hall. "If I step down," she asked the city attorney, "does it save the department?" "It saves your pension," came the reply. That night, she drafted her resignation. As the headlines shifted, "Police chief resigns amid corruption probe." Ford made one last desperate move. He hired a contact to forge an internal memo suggesting Aisha had falsified parts of her report. The forgery leaked online, but this time, the public didn't buy it. "They're scared," Maya said when the file hit the news. "They're sloppy." "Then it's time," Aisha replied. "No more waiting." She gathered the core witnesses, Harold Jenkins, Sophia Ramirez, Dr. Brooks, and Officer Vaughn, and brought them to the federal building for formal depositions. Carla handled the questions, her voice calm and deliberate. "Mr. Jenkins, in your own words, what did you see?" "I saw a good woman try to keep the peace," Harold said firmly. "And I saw a man in uniform lose control." Sophia followed, her recording authenticated by FBI tech teams. The 38-second clip filled the courtroom, Hale's taunting words, the slap of his fist, and Aisha's voice. "You just assaulted a federal officer." It was undeniable. Still, the retaliation came fast. Aisha's apartment was broken into that night. Nothing was stolen, only her files moved, her drawers rifled through. A note left on her desk read, "Drop it or pay for it." Jamal found her sitting in the dark when he came home. They broke into our house. She whispered, "They want me afraid." He knelt beside her. "They don't understand who you are." She looked up, eyes glistening. "No, Jamal. They do. That's why they're scared." The next day, the Department of Justice officially announced a joint federal investigation into the Detroit Police Department. 15 officers were placed on administrative leave. Hale and Ford were arrested on obstruction charges. The media storm exploded. Protesters filled the courthouse steps, demanding accountability. When Ford was escorted out in cuffs, he glared at Aisha across the crowd. "You think you won?" he hissed. "This isn't over. It's over for the ones who hide behind fear." She answered. Meanwhile, Hale sat in a holding cell, trembling, sweating through his uniform. He muttered to himself, "They set me up. I did what they told me." The truth was catching up faster than his lies could run. That evening, Aisha met with Carla and Maya at the federal building. "We'll have the arraignment in a week," Carla said. "Ford will plead not guilty, but we've got him. Vaughn's testimony seals it." Aisha nodded, exhaling slowly. "For the first time in months, I feel like this city's breathing again." "Don't relax yet," Maya warned. "Justice doesn't happen in headlines. It happens in courtrooms, outside." A crowd still chanted her name. Reporters shouted questions as she exited the building. But she stopped only once to speak. "This isn't about me," she said into the microphones. "This is about what happens when silence is broken. No badge, no title, no color. No one is above the law." The cheers rose behind her, echoing across the streets of Detroit. And though she knew the hardest part, the trial, was still ahead, she also knew something fundamental had shifted. The wall of silence had cracked, and for the first time, sunlight was pouring through. The federal courthouse in downtown Detroit was packed to its limits. Reporters filled every corner. Cameras flashed under the tall marble arches, and the quiet hum of whispers carried tension that could be felt in the air. This was the day the city had waited for. The trial of Sergeant Elias Ford, Officer Marcus Hale, and Officer Derek Vaughn. The case was titled United States v. Ford et al., and presiding over it was Judge Harlan Wright, a man known for fairness, but feared for his precision. Aisha Washington sat at the witness table, her posture steady, her face calm, though her heart beat in quiet anticipation. Carla Simmons, the federal prosecutor, stood tall beside her, folders stacked with evidence, audio transcripts, and sworn statements. "When this day is done," Carla whispered to Aisha, "Detroit will remember your name, not as a victim, but as the reason this city started to change." The bailiff called the court to order. All rise. The room silenced. The defendants entered under heavy escort. Hale looked older, heavier, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Ford carried himself with forced dignity, jaw tight, eyes defiant. Vaughn, by contrast, looked pale and remorseful, his guilt carved across his face. Judge Wright's gavel came down once. "This court will maintain order. Proceed." "Counselor," Carla began with clarity. "Your Honor, this case is not about one bad cop or one bad day. It's about a culture, a system that allowed abuse, intimidation, and corruption to thrive. The evidence will show that Agent Aisha Washington was assaulted while performing her duty and that her attackers conspired to obstruct justice through lies, threats, and manipulation." She paused, letting each word hang in the air. "And it will show that silence is not loyalty. It's complicity." The defense attorney rose, smug in his confidence. "Your Honor, the prosecution will try to paint this as some grand civil rights crusade. But the facts are simple. A misunderstanding escalated between professionals under stress. Agent Washington's reaction was excessive. Sergeant Ford acted within his discretion. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Judge Wright raised his gavel. "I will have silence. Proceed with testimony." The first witness was Harold Jenkins. He walked to the stand with the help of a cane, his steps slow but certain. "Mr. Jenkins," Carla asked, "tell us what you saw that day." "I saw that woman try to stop a man from doing something dangerous," he said firmly. "She was polite. He hit her. Plain as that." "And did she strike him first?" "No, ma'am. She only defended herself." "Thank you. Mr. Jenkins." The defense attorney approached. "Mr. Jenkins, with all respect, your eyesight isn't what it used to be, correct?" Harold smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I can still see right from wrong." A quiet wave of laughter rippled through the courtroom. Next came Sophia Ramirez. Her hands trembled slightly as she swore in, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Ms. Ramirez," Carla said gently, "you made an audio recording that day. Could you tell the court why?" "I didn't mean to," she said softly. "I was testing my phone for a class project, but when I heard them arguing, I kept it on." "And what did it capture?" "Everything," Sophia whispered. The audio played through the courtroom, Hale's voice echoing with venom. "You people always think you can tell us what to do." The sound of the strike followed. Then Aisha's steady, painful voice. "You just assaulted a federal officer." The silence afterward was absolute. Even the defense lawyer lowered his eyes. Hale shifted uncomfortably, muttering to himself. Carla ended simply. No further questions. The defense tried to discredit the clip, claiming audio distortion, but their argument fell flat. Then came Officer Derek Vaughn. His testimony was the turning point. "Officer Vaughn," Carla began, "you were present during the incident. What did you see?" He hesitated, hands clasped tightly. "I saw Officer Hale hit her. I saw Sergeant Ford tell me to lie in the report. He said the Bureau would ruin our lives if we didn't protect each other. Did you follow his orders?" "At first," Vaughn admitted. "I wrote what he told me to, but I couldn't live with it. Agent Washington didn't do anything wrong. And why come forward now?" Vaughn's voice cracked. "Because she gave me a chance to do the right thing. Nobody ever did that before." Ford's lawyer objected. "Speculation." But Judge Wright overruled him. "Let him finish." The judge said, "I'm done," Vaughn whispered. "I just wanted to tell the truth." Finally, it was Aisha's turn. She rose, walked to the stand, and looked out at the courtroom. Cameras clicked softly as she raised her right hand and took the oath. "Agent Washington," Carla said, "can you describe what happened on July 17th at Campus Martius Park?" Aisha spoke clearly, without anger, but with quiet strength. "I saw a police officer smoking near a propane tank. I asked him to step away. He insulted me, called me names. I identified myself as an FBI agent. He hit me. I didn't fight back. I defended myself. Then his superiors tried to silence me." "Why do you think this happened?" Carla asked. "Because to him, I didn't belong in that uniform," Aisha replied softly. "To him, my badge didn't mean protection. It meant defiance. And what did you learn from all this?" Aisha looked toward Hale and Ford. "That silence is how injustice survives. But truth, no matter how painful, always finds a voice." The courtroom was still. Even Judge Wright paused before speaking. "Thank you, Agent Washington." The defense attempted a weak cross-examination, suggesting mutual escalation, but their credibility had evaporated. When closing arguments arrived, Carla's voice carried through the chamber like a verdict itself. For decades, people like Sergeant Ford have hidden behind the phrase, "just doing my job." But a badge is not a license to abuse power. A uniform is not armor against accountability. And justice, real justice, does not protect the comfortable. It protects the truth. The jury deliberated for 5 tense hours. Reporters camped outside. Protesters gathered in the streets, chanting Aisha's name. Finally, the courtroom doors reopened. The foreperson stood, voice steady. On the charge of assaulting a federal officer, we find Marcus Hale guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find Elias Ford guilty. On the charge of accessory and intimidation of witnesses, we find Derek Vaughn guilty, with recommendation for leniency due to cooperation. The air seemed to release all at once. Hale slumped forward, face buried in his hands. Ford stared blankly ahead, his arrogance gone. Vaughn wept quietly, thanking Aisha under his breath. Judge Wright delivered the sentences firmly. Officer Hale, 7 years in federal prison. Sergeant Ford, 3 years. Officer Vaughn, 2 years, reduced for cooperation. Then he looked toward Aisha. Agent Washington, this court commends your courage. You've reminded this city what justice looks like when it refuses to stay silent. The gavel struck. Applause filled the room, not loud or chaotic, but powerful, like a tide washing away years of fear. Aisha exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a moment. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, Detroit had taken a breath of truth. 6 months had passed since the verdict. But Detroit had not forgotten. The ripple of justice from Aisha Washington's case had become a movement, not of rage, but of awakening. Streets that once whispered about corruption now spoke openly about reform. Billboards carried messages of accountability, and schools held assemblies about integrity in law enforcement. At the heart of it all, Aisha stood quietly, far from the spotlight, continuing her work with the FBI while mentoring young cadets in community policing initiatives. The bruises on her face had long faded, but the scars within, the ones carved by betrayal, loss, and endurance, remained as reminders of why she fought. That morning, she stood before the mirror, buttoning her navy suit. Jamal entered, smiling softly. "You sure you're ready for this?" She glanced at him through the reflection. "I've been ready my whole life. They just didn't know it." Together they walked out, heading toward the Detroit Civic Center, where the Department of Justice and community leaders were unveiling the new Integrity and Accountability Reform Act. Legislation inspired directly by her case. Inside, hundreds gathered, citizens, officers, veterans, students. Carla Simmons took the stage first. 6 months ago, this city watched a woman stand against a wall of silence. She began. Today, that wall no longer stands. Applause erupted when Aisha was called forward. The room fell into respectful quiet. She looked across the crowd, faces of every color, every age, and began to speak. "I didn't ask to become the face of this fight," she said. "All I did was refuse to be silent when silence was comfortable. The truth is, what happened to me wasn't unique. It happens every day to people who don't wear a badge, who don't have a platform. I just had the training and the privilege to fight back. The real heroes are the ones who still believe justice is worth protecting." Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. "My father used to tell me, justice isn't loud, Aisha. It's patient. It's the quiet promise that no lie will last forever." For years, I thought he was wrong, but standing here now, I realize he was right. Justice takes time, but it always finds its way, in the audience. Sofia Ramirez smiled, holding her phone, the same one that had recorded that damning audio clip. Harold Jenkins sat beside her, wearing a neatly pressed suit for the first time in years. Officer Vaughn, now a free man after serving his reduced sentence, sat a few rows behind, head lowered in humility. He had found work at a youth mentorship center, teaching kids about ethics and responsibility in law enforcement. Meanwhile, Chief Victoria Lang, who had resigned in disgrace, sat quietly near the back. Her face was pale but composed. After the scandal, she had spent months volunteering at community programs, trying to rebuild the trust she'd once squandered. Aisha's eyes met hers briefly. No hatred, only a kind of quiet acknowledgement that redemption takes courage too. Outside, reporters interviewed citizens about the changes since the trial. Cops still make mistakes, one man said, but now they think twice before hiding behind the badge. Another added, that woman reminded this city that truth doesn't wear a color. Later that evening, as the sun sank over the skyline, Aisha and Jamal stood at Campus Martius Park, where it all began. The city had placed a small bronze plaque there, engraved with words from Judge Wright's verdict. Silence protects no one. Justice demands a voice. Aisha ran her hand gently across the plaque. Do you think it really changed anything? She asked. Jamal looked at her. It changed everything. You gave people permission to speak again. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's enough. Nearby, a group of children played, their laughter echoing where once there had been shouting and fear. A young black girl, no older than 10, approached shyly. Are you Agent Washington? She asked. Aisha knelt down, smiling. I am. The girl grinned. My teacher said you made the bad cops go to jail. I want to be like you. Aisha's throat tightened. Then promise me something, she said softly. Be brave, even when it's hard. Speak the truth, even when it's lonely. The girl nodded. I promise. As she ran back to her friends, Jamal placed an arm around Aisha's shoulder. Looks like your legacy's already started. No, Aisha replied. It's not my legacy. It's ours. That night, the Detroit skyline shimmered under a calm sky. The Federal Oversight Committee announced that 15 officers had been permanently removed, and new body camera laws were being implemented citywide. Training programs named after Aisha's father, the Leonard Washington Initiative for Ethical Policing, had launched across Michigan and in a quiet press release. The Department of Justice confirmed what many had suspected. The investigation had uncovered evidence linking Ford's network to regional corruption stretching beyond Detroit. Arrests continued silently in the background, ensuring no one escaped accountability. Months later, Hale died in prison, liver failure from years of drinking. Ford lived out his sentence in isolation, refusing all interviews. Vaughn attended his parole hearing with a Bible in hand, thanking Aisha publicly for saving his soul more than once. But the city no longer revolved around them. It had begun to heal. On the first anniversary of the incident, Aisha returned to the park with Jamal. She placed a single white rose near the plaque and whispered, For my father, and for every voice they tried to silence. Jamal took her hand. You did it. She shook her head gently. We did it. The night air carried the sound of music from a nearby stage. A summer concert. Families gathered under string lights. The same park once marked by violence, now filled with laughter. Aisha looked out at the city she'd fought for, her heart full yet calm. Justice isn't about punishment, she said softly. It's about restoration. Jamal smiled. And you restored a whole city. She rested her head on his shoulder, eyes glimmering in the evening light. No, she whispered. Detroit restored itself. The camera of imagination would pull back here, the park glowing under the amber streetlights, the skyline tall and proud, the hum of life returned. For once. There were no sirens, no shouts, no fear, only the sound of a city breathing freely again. Aisha closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. Justice had come full circle, not in anger, but in grace. And that, she knew, was the truest victory of all. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us tell more stories about courage, truth, and justice.